Hey, what's going on, everybody? Justin here with
Tim. Hey.
Yeah, my good friend. You've probably seen him on a couple other videos we've done together on the channel. And we also got Daisy Pup here, our fearless
intrepid leader.
Yes, our fearless captain. Gets a little easily distracted, you know, but she's a good tracker.
Yeah. Tells us about every squirrel.
Yes, every animal in existence in the woods.
Speaking of local wildlife.
Yeah, if you don't follow me on Twitter or Instagram, you really should, because my neighbor here, I'll put the picture right there. This was a picture I took yesterday morning when he decided to have breakfast with me.
So naturally, we decided the smartest thing to do after that was to walk out deep into the woods.
Of course it was. Northern Maine, right?
Yeah.
Well, and what?
Come on.
Well, I guess you're not really Northern Canada. What would that just be? Just
Southern Canada, really. Yeah.
New Brunswick.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't have a good catchphrase.
Well, Eastern Canada, I suppose.
Yeah. But anyways, in this video, we just figured we'd do a literary walk. And for the topic for this walk, we figured we'd each pick some 3 books or book series that we think are generally underrated in the fantasy genre or the fantasy community. So do you want to start us off, Tim?
Sure. I think for a standalone book, Tanith Lee's Tales from the Flat Earth. Hugely underrated book. Now it's a weird book. I'm gonna have to say weird. It's less a novel than a collection of kind of interconnected short stories, all about the mythology of some, ancient, long ago time in the world, where we're all compelled by a demon king named Ejerarn and his various wicked associates. But yeah, it's extremely well written, extremely bizarre. You're never gonna read anything quite like it. Which, I don't know, gives at least number 3 spot on the list for me, because nobody talks about Tales from the Flat Earth. Like, I'm probably the only
one. I mean, you've told me about it before, yeah. But I don't think I've ever seen anyone else talk about it. Also, I apologize if you hear a lawnmower, like a neighbor across the way is lawn mowing. It's like super loud, so I apologize if that is being picked up quite a bit in the video. Alright, so for my third one, you guys all know I really enjoy Flintlock fantasy. It's sort of a subgenre of fantasy, and I think Brian McClellan's Powder Mage trilogy, and actually more of his whole universe, because I do believe his second trilogy, or Gods of Blood and Powder, is even better. I don't see very many people talking about it. I don't know if it's because Flintlock fantasy is not like kind of a popular subgenre of fantasy, but I think his world, most people enjoy magic systems, which is kind of ironic because it's one of the parts of a book that I really don't care that much about, to be honest.
Yeah, me neither, to be honest. So,
but his whole schematic universe, or that was like the worst possible phrase ever. His whole setup for like magic, I think, works really well. There's like 3 or 4 different kinds, and it's not necessary that they cancel each other out, but none of them are essentially overpowered over each other. Yeah. You got powder mages who can sort of manipulate firearms using essentially like black powder as a form of drug, almost like cocaine, but they can do things like, shape bullets around walls, stuff like that. Then you got privilege, who are sort of like kind of the sorcerer archetype, kind of manipulate sort of the ether. It's known as the elves in the Powder Mage universe. And then you also have Nact, which are kind of people that just have like little uncanny abilities.
It's all just very well constructed.
Yeah, and also there's blood magic too, blood sorcerers who have to use sort of sacrifice in order to like kind of accomplish things, which I think is really cool as well. But like I said, it's kind of a well-crafted Napoleonic era Flintlock fantasy that I just think works really well. And he's got different kind of plot lines going on at the same time. You got Aram with kind of his detective Sherlock Holmes stuff going on. You got Tamaz, who's sort of the the wizened field marshal. Right. And then you just got all kinds of things kind of going on. It's not just battles after battles after battles going on.
There's something for everything.
Exactly. So that's why I'm going to go with Brian McClellan's Powder Mage universe, I guess, because he's got 2 trilogies and several novellas in the universe.
Right. The general.
I'm too lazy to edit it, so you're gonna see all this like bad stuff as well.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to Tim again.
Right, number 2. I've kind of been debating on number 2. I know what number 1 will be, but all right, I'm gonna go
Oh, and there's the garden, by the way. You guys can see. I gotta weed it though.
Which was traversed by the bear probably yesterday.
I don't think so. I don't think he cared that much about the garden.
Right. Sorry, back on topic. Number 2. I am going to go, perhaps controversially, with Conan the Barbarian.
Yes. Yes.
Now, don't get me wrong, it's not great literature by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of these things were written kind of on the fly. I do think that Robert E. Howard could kind of write when he wanted to. That said, a lot of them were just kind of written for money at the time, you know, and kind of on the seat.
Well, that was literally his job. I will say his life is kind of sad. He did kind of get screwed over by a lot of the magazines and publishers and stuff.
Right.
As we're just gonna go in the tall grass and see what we can explore here. We got something of a path.
Apart from the fact that he wasn't a great prose stylist most of the time, Howard is not given maybe enough credit for kind of being one of the pioneers of world building in fantasy. Like, this is pre-Tolkien, this is pre-Lewis.
That's true, with like all the kind of the ancient cities and you know, the sunken not sunken ruins, but like ruins of old civilizations and stuff. That was like a big thing of his.
Right. I mean, there were fairy stories before then. There was George MacDonald. There was Pope Merrilies, but they were all doing kind of you know, modern person enters a fantastical realm that doesn't really have any rules. Howard was one of the first ones to come up with this kind of really world-built ancient world where you lived in it all the time as a reader. You know, you never saw something on the outside. It wasn't a kind of fairyland with chaotic rules. It all operated pretty cleanly. Also, the character of Conan, while not complex, is definitely more complex he's been made out to be in subsequent iterations.
Exactly. Yeah. He's not just like a dumb brute barbarian.
He does wear shirts once in a while. Yeah. But yeah, that'll be mine. Number 2, Conan the Barbarian. Oh god.
What?
Oh no.
Oh,
that's Conan the Barbarian.
Oh, I thought you meant like the bugs were like killing you or something.
Well, they are, but yeah.
Yeah, it's been a really rough year where we live for bugs. Not gonna lie at all. Look, you can't even see Daisy in this tall grass.
Yes.
She's having a blast, as you guys can probably tell in the backgrounds and stuff. All right, my number 2. I'm gonna stick with the Flintlock fantasy genre because I am very unoriginal like that. And I'm gonna go with Django Wexler's Shadow Campaigns series, which is also obviously a Flintlock fantasy series, but it's almost in a time period a little bit earlier than like the Napoleonic era that a lot of Flintlock fantasies take place in. This is almost more of like maybe a little bit after like the 30 Years' War, because rifles are kind of like a rarer commodity. Like only like elite troops would have like rifles and stuff, so they're actually using like legit muskets and stuff, which I think is actually really cool. Sort of the way that you have to develop the world and everything. And there's a little bit of magic in the Shadow Campaigns, but the major element is actually almost being possessed by a demon. But what's interesting is the demon literally just sort of like lives inside your body, like kind of like on a metaphysical level. As well as a physical level. So you're not just like completely like crazy like a demon possessed person like sometimes you're stereotypically kind of like thought to be, if that makes sense. You can't really control them, but they have like a mind of their own and they just sort of do their own thing, which I think is really cool. But there's 5 books in the series and I've read the first 3, and the first book I thought was just a really awesome take on sort of colonialism of like empire building, which is kind of a like, you know, that's a big topic to like, you know, we have repercussions of that in the modern age as well. So I think that's kind of interesting. Look, the second book I think was a little bit weaker, not like terribly so, but definitely a little bit weaker, kind of like a take on like the French Revolution with the terror and the guillotine and everything like that. And then the third one really picked up, just like super fast pace. You got awesome characters, lots of like strong female characters. Many of them, like the main character, Winter Earnglass, it literally disguises herself as a male soldier so she can fight in the army of the Empire of the book. And she keeps that disguise throughout the first book. At least not gonna reveal anything else, but I just think it's really cool dealing with stuff like that. So yeah, there's the Shadow Campaigns. And that lawnmower is really loud, so I apologize again. It's not my lawnmower. And you could probably see all these flies killing us.
Yeah.
Whoever thought of these like literary walks as being a good thing, they were pretty dumb. So
who was that? It was yours, wasn't it, Daisy?
Don't blame the pup.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do one more each.
Yeah, all right, one more. For my number one, I'm gonna go with Broken Sword, Paul Anderson.
Yeah, he's been trying to make me read that for forever. He even gave me a copy, I think, and
he did, yeah.
I still haven't read it, guys.
Traitor, no. Broken Sword came out roughly at the same time as Lord of the Rings, actually. Very similar kind of build to that book. Again, going with the Norse mythology, like Tolkien.
I wonder what our neighbor thinks of us, like awkwardly walking around like the woods and the tall grass with a like a camcorder, like a GoPro on a stick.
Well, whatever. Yeah, again, Norse mythological story, very much modeled after a Norse saga. Kind of the old-fashioned syntax and dialogue. And, you know...
Is this a standalone, Tim?
Standalone, yeah. And actually a very good, very interesting story. That probably would have gotten bigger had it not been for Lord of the Rings utterly eclipsing it.
Yeah, pretty much at the same time.
So again, you don't get a lot of people talking about Broken Sword. You don't get a lot of even reprints of Broken
Also, interesting fact, Paul Anderson wrote some Conan stories post-Howard, actually.
Yeah. So you can see where my headspace is at.
Well, I did too. I literally did two. Two Flintlock fantasy series too. Yeah.
But yeah, Broken Sword, great little standalone book. Great iteration of kind of different mythologies colliding, especially the Norse mythology. And yeah, just a really worthwhile book if you want to check it out, that pretty much no one else is reading or talking about right now.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anyone talk about Paul Anderson.
Really that's kind of why I'm going for it, to be honest, yeah. It's really niche of the niche stuff. You'll see it on a few like top fantasy lists.
Cool.
Other than that, yeah, it's very, very much forgotten, unfortunately.
All right, so that leaves one more for me, and I'm gonna go with a very, very, very popular author who eclipsed Paul Anderson, apparently. So I'm gonna go with Tolkien, but I'm not gonna go with Lord of the Rings.
You did it. You went for Tolkien.
Or the Hobbit, or the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna go with Children of Húrin by Tolkien.
Yes. And read by the inimitable Chris
yes, and if you do the audiobook, it's narrated by Chris Lee, and it is absolutely fantastic. I can't recommend it enough. It's probably one of the best audiobooks I've ever listened to, by far. So it's a great story and great narration, obviously, by Christopher Lee. But anyways, I'm going with the Children of Húrin because not many people talk about sort of the post-death posthumous, the Christopher Tolkien edited posthumous stuff. And while, probably some of it is like a money grab type thing at some level, but really, Chris just does respect his grandfather's corpus, sort of in general. He's trying to keep it as pure as possible. But anyways, I'm going with the Children of Húrin because this is like grimdark Tolkien. As Daisy is not listening to Tim. Daisy doesn't respect him, I don't think.
No.
Come on, pup. There she comes. All right, but sorry about that, guys. But anyways, Children of Húrin is like grimdark Tolkien. If that doesn't seem to make sense, because he's sort of the creator of that whole kind of pure, almost like high epic fantasy, right?
It's very much like a Norse saga.
But yeah,
Norse saga.
Yeah, he was definitely heavily inspired by like epic poetry and the Norse sagas, things like that. I mean, he was a professor of like what, Anglo-Saxon literature, wasn't he?
Yeah, it's actually interesting we ended up with these two because they're kind of similar in tone in some ways. Broken Sword and Children of Húrin. Yeah. And the respective authors kind of take on a, the tragic heroic Norse saga. It's it really reads like something from like.
It really does.
Like one of the Eddas, for example.
But yeah, the Children of Húrin is a tale from the first age of Middle-earth. You have Húrin Turumbar, and it's basically just his whole sad tale. It's almost like epic poetry plus Greek tragedy. You got very heavy Oedipus Rex themes going on here, if that doesn't give away anything. But Turin Turumbar's story is just uber despair and tragedy, and sort of like his rise and fall from grace and redemption, and just his I mean, of what I don't know how else to describe it without giving stuff away, but his love life
story though, one of Tolkien's darkest and most interesting.
Definitely his most dark thing, or
as far as I remember anyway.
by far. But anyways, I think that one's very underrated just because I don't see many of this posthumous Tolkien stuff ever being talked about really around the community very often.
Yeah.
Maybe a tiny bit like right when it comes out, but I've never seen like people do like really like book reviews and things of that. But yeah, I can't recommend Children of Hurin enough, especially if you like darker stuff, because it definitely shows that Tolkien wasn't all just about just sort of the, you know, pure good, like, you know, the good guys always win type thing, sort of going on.
He's sometimes pigeonholed into that black and white morality, you know.
As the grandfather of, you know, epic,
right,
pure epic fantasy.
Like, you know, the orcs versus the humans and yada yada.
As we're like dying from the flies and mosquitoes. All right, so we'll make a mad dash to the house as we wrap things up. So,
yeah, those are our picks. In summation, read more fantasy inspired by Norse sagas.
And Flintlock fantasy and guns and fantasy. Was it muskets and magic and Flintlock fantasy? And I think there's another term for it.
Yeah.
I think there's a third one. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, but I think that's a very interesting subgenre of fantasy, especially since it's heavily inspired by history. Just because obviously, if you have sort of like the steam age, or even before that, if you have like, you know, muskets and artillery and stuff, it brings a whole new dimension, especially to the combat and warfare of sort of these like big drawn out epic fantasy series. Since it's not all just melee fighting per se, even though you still have swords and spears and horses and cavalry and everything. When you add cannons and guns and gunpowder and bullets to the mix, it makes it really interesting.
Different than the classic.
Exactly. And obviously, since I really enjoy reading nonfiction and history, as you guys probably know, it's kind of nice to see sort of like historical themes and elements being brought to the forefront as well. Especially things like, you know, political ideas on tyranny. That's kind of a big one because of the French Revolution and things like that. That's kind of a major theme in a lot of Flintlock fantasies. But there you guys have it. Norse sagas, Flintlock fantasies. Tell us what you think are some underrated books and underrated fantasy series that you really enjoy that you don't think get enough love in online or in the community, anything like that. Let us know in the comments. We'd be glad to share some thoughts on them and find out some more underrated series. For sure. So I think that's it for me. Is that it for you, Tim?
That's it for me.
All right. So even if you read underrated stuff, everyone, always remember, read victoriously.